My wife and her AP set me up for tax fraud. I got 18 months in federal prison. They got my money, my house, and each other. Every single month, they requested to visit me. Every single month, I checked the box, denied. They wanted forgiveness. They wanted closure. What they're going to get is a courtroom, a jury, and justice so brutal they'll wish I'd stayed locked up forever. My name is Cameron Bradford. I'm 45 years old, and until 18 months ago, I was the manufacturing plant manager at Riverside Industrial Solutions in Ohio. Good job, good salary, good benefits. The kind of position you were 20 years to get. My wife, Jessica, and I had been married for 16 years. We had a 14-year-old daughter, Sophie, who was the center of our world. At least, I thought she was the center of our world. The first real warning sign came on a Tuesday evening in March. I came home from the plant around 7, exhausted from dealing with the production line shutdown. Jessica was in the kitchen, but she wasn't cooking. She was on her phone, typing furiously, and when I walked in, she practically threw into her purse. "Hey," I said, loosening my tie. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Jessica said quickly. Too quickly. "Just work stuff." Jessica managed the marketing department at a mid-sized consulting firm downtown. She'd always been dedicated to her job, but lately, she'd been working late more often. Weekend emails. Emergency client calls that required her to leave the house at odd hours. "How was your day?" I asked, opening the refrigerator. "Busy. We have a new financial consultant joining the team. Troy Anderson. He's supposed to help streamline our accounting processes." I grabbed a beer and turned to look at her. She was staring at her purse where she'd hidden her phone, her fingers tapping nervously on the counter. "That's good," I said. "Lord knows your department could use some organization." She didn't smile. She used to smile at my jokes, even the bad ones. Over the next few weeks, Troy Anderson's name came up more and more. Troy suggested this. Troy implemented that. Troy was revolutionizing their entire financial structure. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid attention to the way Jessica's eyes lit up when she talked about him. But I was busy. The plant was going through a major efficiency overhaul, and I was working 60-hour weeks trying to keep production numbers up while implementing new systems. I trusted my wife. I trusted our marriage. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was not checking our financial documents more carefully. Jessica had always handled our personal taxes. She was better with numbers than I was, or so I thought. She'd sit at the dining room table with her laptop and a stack of papers, organizing everything, filing electronically. I'd sign where she told me to sign. "We're getting a nice refund this year," she'd say, and I'd nod, grateful we had money coming back instead of owing. I never looked at the actual returns, never questioned the deductions, never wondered why certain business expenses were being claimed under my name when I didn't run a business. That was my second mistake. By June, Jessica was working late 3 or 4 nights a week. Sophie started asking me why Mom was never home for dinner anymore. "She's working on an important project, sweetheart," I'd tell her. "It'll calm down soon." But it didn't calm down. It got worse. The unraveling started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. It was late July, a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage, working on an old motorcycle I'd been restoring for the past year. It was my escape, my therapy, something I could control with my hands when everything else felt chaotic. Jessica told me she was running to the grocery store. I heard her car pull out of the driveway, heard the engine fade down the street. But 10 minutes later, I went inside to grab a beer, and I heard her voice coming from the backyard. I walked to the kitchen window and saw her standing by the fence, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "I can't keep doing this," Jessica was saying. "He's going to find out eventually." I froze, bottle halfway to my lips. "No, Troy, listen to me," she continued. "The last transfer was too large. If he checks the business account statements, he'll see the withdrawals." My chest tightened. I set the beer down slowly, carefully, trying not to make noise. "I know we need to move faster," Jessica said, "but we have to be smart about this. If Cameron gets suspicious before everything's in place, the whole plan falls apart." "The whole plan? What plan?" "The IRS won't start looking for another 2 months at least," she continued. "By then, everything will be locked down. He'll take the fall, and we'll be clear." I stopped breathing. "I have to go," Jessica said suddenly. "I'll see you Monday. We can finalize the Cayman accounts then." She ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at her phone. Then she turned and walked back toward the house. I moved fast, heading back to the garage before she could see me. My hand was shaking. My mind was racing. Cayman accounts. IRS. He'll take the fall. What the hell had I signed? I waited until Jessica left again, this time genuinely going to the store. The moment her car disappeared, I went straight to our home office. My wife kept everything organized in a filing cabinet by her desk. Tax documents, financial records, bank statements. I started pulling files. What I found made my blood run cold. There were documents I'd never seen before. Articles of incorporation for a consulting company called Bradford Solutions, LLC. Registered in Delaware. Registered under my name and social security number. The business address was a P.O. box I didn't recognize. I kept digging. Bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed. Transactions showing hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through this company. Payments from clients I'd never heard of. Invoices for services I'd never provided. And tax returns. Federal returns filed under my name, claiming massive business deductions. Home office expenses for a business I didn't run. Equipment purchases I'd never made. Employee salaries for people who didn't exist. All of it fraudulent. All of it under my name. I found emails printed out and tucked in the back of a folder. Correspondence between Jessica and Troy Anderson. Planning sessions. Strategy discussions. They'd been setting this up for months. The scheme was elegant in its cruelty. They'd created a shell company under my name, run fake revenue through it, claimed huge deductions, and pocketed the difference. When the IRS eventually audited the company, which they inevitably would given the red flags, I'd be the one on the hook. My name, my social security number, my signature on every document. Jessica and Troy would walk away clean. I'd go to prison. I sat in that office chair for 2 hours, reading through everything, my rage building with each page. My wife hadn't just cheated on me. She conspired with her lover to commit federal tax fraud in my name. She was setting me up to take the fall for their crimes while they ran off with the money. By the time Jessica came home with groceries, I made copies of everything, photographed every document with my phone, uploaded them to a secure cloud storage. I wasn't going down without a fight. I didn't confront Jessica that night. That's what she would have expected, what most men would have done. Storm in, wave the documents, demand answers. But I'd spent 20 years managing complex operations, solving problems that required patience and strategy. This situation was no different. I needed to think like a plant manager, not like a betrayed husband. Over the next 3 days, I maintained perfect normalcy. Came home at my usual time, kissed Jessica on the cheek, asked about her day. She had no idea I knew everything. No idea I was watching her every move, cataloging every lie. On Thursday evening, I told Jessica I needed to work late at the plant. Instead, I drove to meet with Gerald Hopkins, a criminal defense attorney my college roommate had recommended. Gerald's office was in downtown Cleveland, 20th floor with a view of Lake Erie. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Bradford," Gerald said, shaking my hand. "Tom spoke highly of you. Said you needed help with a sensitive matter." I sat down and slid a USB drive across his desk. "Everything's on there. I need you to look at it and tell me how bad this is." Gerald plugged in the drive and started reading. His expression darkened with each document. "Your wife did this?" he asked after 20 minutes. "My wife and her lover," I said. "Troy Anderson. He works in her company's finance department." Gerald leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Bradford, this is federal tax fraud on a significant scale. We're looking at potentially $300,000 in fraudulent deductions and unreported income flowing through shell companies registered in your name. What's my exposure? If the IRS discovers this, and they will discover it, you're looking at criminal charges. Tax evasion, wire fraud, possibly money laundering. We're talking 5 to 10 years in federal prison." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Even though I didn't do it, I asked. "Your signature is on the documents," Gerald said. "Your social security number. Your name on the company registration. Proving you didn't know about it will be extremely difficult. The burden of proof is on you, and right now, all the evidence points to your guilt." I sat there absorbing that reality. My wife had built a perfect trap. Even if I could prove the affair, even if I could show she conspired with Troy, I was still the one whose name was on everything. What are my options? I asked. Gerald steepled his fingers. Option 1. Go to the FBI immediately. Report the fraud. Cooperate fully. Hope they believe you're a victim and not a co-conspirator. It's risky. They might still charge you. Option 2. Build a case before anyone else discovers the fraud. Gather evidence of the conspiracy between your wife and her lover. Document everything. Bank records, emails, witness statements. If you can prove they deliberately framed you, you might avoid prosecution entirely. How long do I have? Hard to say. Months, maybe. The IRS processes audits slowly. But once they flag your returns, the clock starts ticking fast. I drove home in silence, my mind working through scenarios. I couldn't go to the authorities yet. I needed proof of the conspiracy, proof that would hold up in court. That night, I installed monitoring software on our home computer. Keyloggers, screen capture programs, email trackers. Everything ran in the background, invisible to Jessica. I also called an old friend from the Army, Pete Davidson, who now ran a private investigation firm in Columbus. Cam, good to hear from you, Pete said when he answered. What's going on? I need surveillance on my wife, I said, and I need it done quietly. The monitoring software gave me everything I needed. Within a week, I had Jessica's complete email correspondence with Troy, planning sessions, bank account details, transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, even discussions about what they'd do after I was safely in prison. That phrase haunted me. Safely in prison. As if I were a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. Pete's surveillance confirmed what I already suspected. Jessica and Troy were meeting 3 times a week at a hotel near her office. Not just affair meetings, but planning sessions. They bring laptops, documents, spend hours coordinating their scheme. I showed everything to Gerald Hopkins. This is good, Gerald said, reviewing the evidence. This proves conspiracy. But we need to act fast. I'm hearing through channels that the IRS is already looking at your returns. How long do I have? Days, maybe a week. I made my decision that night. I went to the FBI field office in Cleveland the next morning, walked in with Gerald at my side, and requested to speak to an agent about federal tax fraud. The agent who interviewed us was named Sarah Reeves. Mid-40s, professional, skeptical. I laid out everything. The shell company, the fake deductions, Jessica and Troy's affair, the offshore accounts. I showed her the emails, the surveillance photos, the bank records. Why didn't you come to us sooner? Agent Reeves asked. Because I needed proof I was a victim, not a perpetrator, I said. I needed evidence of the conspiracy. She studied me for a long moment. Mr. Bradford, even with this evidence, you're not out of the woods. Your name is on those documents. You'll likely still face charges. I understand, I said, but I'm here cooperating. That has to count for something. It didn't count for enough. 2 weeks later, federal agents arrested me at the plant. They came during the morning shift change, right in front of my employees. Handcuffs, Miranda rights, the whole show. Jessica acted shocked when they arrested her at her office an hour later. Troy tried to run, made it as far as the airport before they picked him up. We all ended up in federal court on the same day. The judge read the charges: conspiracy to commit tax fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. My attorney argued for my cooperation, for the evidence I'd provided showing I was a victim. The prosecutor argued I was equally culpable, that I should have noticed what was happening in my own financial affairs. The judge gave me 18 months in federal prison. Jessica got 36 months. Troy got 42, but I was still going to prison. 18 months for crimes I didn't commit, because my wife had betrayed me, and I'd been too trusting to see it coming. The federal correctional facility in Morgantown, West Virginia, became my home for the next 18 months. They processed me on a cold November morning, took my clothes, gave me a uniform, assigned me to a cell in C Block. My cellmate was a man named Vincent Torres. He was 52, former accountant serving 4 years for embezzlement. He took one look at me and said, "First time?" "Yeah," I admitted. "Tax fraud." Vincent asked, "How'd you know?" "You've got that look. White-collar guy, confused about how you ended up here. Let me guess. Your wife or your business partner screwed you over." "My wife," I said. "And her lover." Vincent nodded like he'd heard it 1,000 times. "My business partner and my lawyer. They framed me for stealing client funds. By the time I figured out what they'd done, I was already indicted." Over the next few weeks, Vincent taught me how to survive. Keep your head down. Don't make enemies. Don't trust anyone. Follow the routine, and time passes faster. The routine was simple. Wake at 6. Count. Breakfast in the cafeteria. Work detail, I got assigned to the library. Lunch. More work. Recreation hour in the yard. Dinner. Count again. Lockdown at 9. Every day the same. Every day feeling like a year. The first visitor request came in December, 3 weeks after I arrived. Jessica Bradford and Troy Anderson, requesting a joint visit. I stared at the request form in disbelief. They had the audacity to come here together, to try to see me as if nothing had happened. You accepting? The guard asked. No, I said firmly. Denied. Your call, the guard said with a shrug. Vincent noticed when I came back to the cell. Visitor request. My wife and her boyfriend, I said bitterly. They want to visit me. Together. Vincent raised his eyebrows. That's bold. I refused. Good. Don't see them. Visits from people who put you here are poison. They'll just mess with your head. But the requests kept coming. Every month, like clockwork. Sometimes Jessica alone. Sometimes both of them. Once just Troy. Each time, I checked the box, denied. I didn't want their apologies or their explanations. I didn't want to see Jessica's face or hear Troy's voice. They destroyed my life, and now they expected me to sit across from them in a visiting room and pretend we could have a civil conversation. I refused to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I worked in the library, reorganizing the legal section, helping other inmates with their appeals. I started building a case for my own future, researching civil litigation, financial fraud, wrongful imprisonment. My daughter Sophie visited once a month. Those were the only visits I accepted. She'd sit across from me in the visiting room, trying to be brave, trying not to cry. How's school? I'd ask, desperate for normalcy. It's okay, Sophie would say. Mom's living with Troy now, in his apartment. The words cut deeper than any prison sentence. My wife had moved in with her lover while I was locked up for their crimes. How do you feel about that? I asked carefully. Sophie looked down at the table. I hate him, Dad. I know what they did to you. Grandma told me everything. My mother. She'd been my rock through all of this, taking care of Sophie while I was inside. Don't hate them, I told Sophie, even though I didn't believe my own words. That'll just eat you up inside. They deserve to be hated, Sophie said quietly. She was right, but I didn't want my daughter consumed by the same anger that kept me awake at night. 6 months into my sentence, my attorney Gerald Hopkins came to visit with news. Cameron, I've been working on your civil case, Gerald said. We're filing suit against Jessica and Troy for fraud, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. What are the chances? I asked. Good. Very good. The criminal conviction of Jessica and Troy helps our case significantly. We can prove they conspired to defraud you, that they deliberately framed you for their crimes. We're seeking full recovery of the stolen funds, plus punitive damages. How much? We're asking for $1.2 million, Gerald said. The stolen money, your legal fees, lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive damages. I'll let that sink in. They don't have that kind of money. Troy might. He came from a wealthy family. And if we win, we can seize assets, garnish wages for years. The point isn't just money, Cameron. It's justice. It's making sure they pay for what they did. After Gerald left, I sat in my cell thinking about the future. 12 more months of prison. Then freedom. Then the real fight would begin. Vincent noticed my mood shift. Good news, he asked. My lawyer's filing a civil suit, I said, going after everyone who put me here. Vincent smiled grimly. Good. Make them bleed. That's the only justice we get in situations like this. The visitor requests continued every month without fail. Jessica and Troy seemed determined to see me, as if their persistence would eventually wear me down. It never did. Month 7. Jessica Bradford, solo visit request. Denied. Month 8. Troy Anderson, solo visit request. Denied. Month 9. Both together again. Denied. Each denial felt like a small victory. Each refusal was me telling them they didn't get to control this narrative anymore. They'd controlled everything else, my finances, my freedom, my reputation. But they couldn't force me to see them. That was my choice, and I chose no. The guards started to recognize the pattern. Your wife again, one of them said in month 10, handing me the request form. You really never see her? Never. I confirmed, checking the denial box. Must have done something pretty bad, the guard observed. She did, I said. She and her boyfriend framed me for tax fraud. That's why I'm here. The guard's expression shifted from curiosity to understanding. And they keep trying to visit you? That's messed up. They want to ease their conscience, I said. Make themselves feel better about what they did. I'm not interested in helping them sleep at night. Word spread through the facility about my situation. Other inmates heard the story, the wife and lover who'd set me up. Some offered advice. Others shared similar stories of betrayal. But Vincent's advice remained the most valuable. Don't let them in your head. Every day you refuse to see them is a day you stay strong. The moment you accept a visit, you're giving them power again. I used my time productively. The library became my sanctuary. I read everything I could find about civil litigation, asset recovery, fraud law. I wrote letters to Gerald Hopkins with ideas for the case, questions about strategy, requests for information. Gerald's paralegal, a sharp woman named Monica, became my primary contact. She'd send me updates every 2 weeks, copies of filings, responses from the defendant's attorneys. Jessica and Troy had hired expensive lawyers, trying to fight the civil suit. They claimed they were victims too, that I'd been involved in the scheme from the beginning. Their attorneys painted me as a co-conspirator trying to shift blame. It was the same strategy they'd used in criminal court, and it had partially worked there. But Gerald was confident it wouldn't work in civil court. The burden of proof is lower, Gerald wrote in one letter. We don't need to prove beyond reasonable doubt. We just need to prove it's more likely than not that they defrauded you. And we have the evidence. Their emails, their offshore accounts, their affair. The jury will see right through their lies. I clung to those words during the long nights in my cell. My daughter Sophie turned 15 while I was inside. My mother threw her a small birthday party. Sophie called me from the prison phone system, and we talked for 15 minutes about school, friends, normal teenage things. Mom wanted me to ask you something, Sophie said hesitantly near the end of the call. My jaw tightened. What? She wants to know if you'll see her. She says she needs to talk to you about the house and finances. Tell your mother she can communicate through her attorney. I said evenly. I have nothing to say to her. That's what I figured, Sophie said. I told her you wouldn't want to see her, but she made me ask. Sophie, you don't have to be her messenger, I said gently. That's not your job. I know. I just wanted you to know she's still asking. After we hung up, I sat in the common area thinking about Jessica's request. She wanted to talk about the house and finances. Translation. She wanted to negotiate asset division before the civil suit destroyed her financially. She was worried. Good. She should be worried. Month 12 brought another visitor request. This time, it was from someone unexpected. Jessica's mother, Linda Bradford. I almost denied it on instinct, but something made me pause. Linda had always been kind to me. She'd apologized after my arrest, saying she couldn't believe what her daughter had done. I accepted the visit. Linda came on a Saturday. She looked older than I remembered, grayer, more tired. She sat across from me in the visiting room with tears in her eyes. Cameron, I'm so sorry, Linda said immediately. I'm so sorry for what Jessica did to you. It's not your fault, I said. I raised her, Linda said. I should have seen the signs. Should have known she was capable of something like this. We talked for an hour. Linda told me about Sophie, about how my daughter was struggling with anger toward her mother, about how Jessica was living with Troy despite being sentenced to 3 years in prison herself. She'd gotten early release to a halfway house after serving 14 months. She's trying to play the victim, Linda said, telling everyone you were involved that she was just following her lead. It makes me sick. The truth will come out, I said. In civil court. I hope so, Linda said. You deserve justice, Cameron. Real justice. As she left, Linda squeezed my hand. 6 more months. Then you can rebuild your life. 6 more months. Then Freedom Day. Then Payback Day. 3 months before my release, Gerald Hopkins visited with a man I'd never met. His name was Robert Flynn, a private investigator Gerald had hired to dig deeper into Jessica and Troy's activities. Cameron, Robert's been conducting surveillance for the past 4 months, Gerald said. What he's found is going to strengthen our case significantly. Robert opened a folder thick with photographs and documents. Mr. Bradford, your wife and Troy Anderson have been living quite comfortably while you've been in here. Let me show you what I've documented. The first photo showed Jessica and Troy entering an expensive restaurant in downtown Cleveland. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago. "This is Marcello's," Robert said. "Entrees start at $80. They've been there 7 times in the past 2 months. Always paying cash." More photos. Jessica and Troy at a car dealership, standing beside a new BMW. "Troy purchased this vehicle 4 weeks ago," Robert explained. "Paid $48,000 in cash." The dealership reported the transaction to the IRS, as required for cash purchases over $10,000. Gerald leaned forward. "Where's that cash coming from, Cameron?" "Troy's salary at the consulting firm is $75,000 a year. Jessica makes $60,000. They shouldn't have that kind of liquid cash." "The offshore accounts," I said. "Exactly," Robert confirmed. "I've been working with a forensic accountant. We've traced additional transfers from the Cayman accounts to a bank in Delaware. Small withdrawals, under $10,000 each, to avoid reporting requirements. But over 6 months, they've pulled out nearly $200,000. My hands clenched into fists. While I sat in a federal prison cell, they were living it up on the money they'd stolen using my name. "There's more," Robert said, pulling out another set of documents. "Troy's been making regular payments to someone. $5,000 a month, cash, delivered to an address in Akron." "Who?" I asked. "His name is Dennis Miller. He's the accountant who helped create the shell companies and file the fraudulent tax returns. Troy's paying him to keep quiet. Can we use this?" I asked Gerald. "Absolutely," Gerald said. "This shows ongoing criminal activity. It demonstrates that Troy knows exactly what he did and is actively covering it up. We can present this to the civil court and potentially refer it to federal prosecutors for additional charges." Robert continued presenting evidence. Photos of Jessica and Troy meeting with a real estate agent, looking at properties in Florida. "They're planning to relocate," Robert said. "Probably trying to get away from the civil suit and the scrutiny. Florida has strong asset protection laws. They're trying to shield their money." "Can they do that?" I asked. "Not if we act fast," Gerald said. "We're filing an emergency motion to freeze their assets. We'll argue they're attempting to hide money and flee the jurisdiction. The judge should grant it." After they left, I sat in my cell processing everything. Jessica and Troy weren't just living off stolen money. They were actively trying to hide more of it, paying off accomplices, planning their escape to another state. Vincent noticed my mood that evening. "Your lawyer brought news?" he asked. "Evidence," I said. "Photos, financial records, proof they're still stealing and hiding money." "Good," Vincent said. "The more evidence, the stronger your case. When you get out, you're going to destroy them." "That's the plan," I confirmed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my bunk thinking about everything Robert had shown me. The expensive dinners, the new car, the cash payments, the Florida properties. Every piece of evidence was another nail in their coffin. 3 more months. Then I'd be free. Then the real battle would begin. The last 3 months of my sentence moved differently than the first 15. Time felt both faster and slower. Faster because I could see the end approaching. Slower because I was impatient to begin the next phase. Gerald's emergency motion to freeze Jessica and Troy's assets was granted. The judge agreed they were attempting to hide money and flee the jurisdiction. Their bank accounts were frozen. The BMW was seized. The Florida real estate deal fell through when they couldn't access funds. According to Gerald's updates, Jessica and Troy were panicking. "Their attorneys are pushing hard for settlement now," Gerald wrote. "They've offered $500,000. They know they're going to lose a trial." I wrote back immediately. "No settlement. I want them in court." Gerald's response came 2 days later. "Understood. Trial is scheduled for 2 months after your release. We'll have time to prepare." Sophie's visits became more frequent in those final months. She came every 2 weeks now, and each time she looked more mature, more confident. "I'm going to testify," Sophie told me during one visit. "At the civil trial. Gerald's lawyer said I can testify about what Mom and Troy did, how they talked about you, how they spent money while you were in here." "Sophie, you don't have to do that," I said carefully. "Testifying against your mother in court, that's a heavy burden." "I want to," Sophie insisted. "She deserves it. What she did to you, to us, to our family. Someone needs to tell the truth about her." My daughter's strength amazed me. At 15, she was braver than most adults I'd known. Grandma's been helping me practice, Sophie continued. She says I need to be clear and direct. Don't get emotional. Just tell what I saw and heard. My mother. I owed her everything. She'd taken care of Sophie, managed my legal affairs, kept our family together while I was locked up. The final visitor request from Jessica and Troy came in my last month. Request for joint visit, marked urgent family matter. I denied it without hesitation. 2 weeks before my release, Vincent was transferred to a lower security facility. We shook hands the morning he left. Stay strong out there, Vincent said. Don't let them see you sweat in that courtroom. You got the evidence. You got the truth. That's all you need. Thanks for everything, I said. You kept me sane in here. We kept each other sane, Vincent corrected. Good luck, Cameron. Make them pay. My last week inside, I barely slept. I spent hours in the library, reviewing case law, preparing mental arguments, thinking through every possible scenario. The morning of my release, I woke before the alarm, packed my few belongings, changed into civilian clothes that felt strange after 18 months in prison uniform. The processing took 2 hours. Paperwork, final medical check, release of personal effects. Everything moved in slow motion until finally, a guard opened the last door and said, "You're free to go, Mr. Bradford." I walked out into the parking lot. May sunshine, warm and bright. Fresh air that didn't smell like industrial cleaning products in desperation. My mother was waiting by her car. Sophie stood beside her. The moment I saw them, something inside me broke open. Sophie ran to me, and I caught her in a hug that felt like coming home. "Dad," she whispered, "you're really out." "I'm really out," I confirmed. My mother hugged me next, tears streaming down her face. "Welcome back, Cameron. We've got work to do." She was right. The civil trial started in 8 weeks. I had 2 months to rebuild my life and prepare to face Jessica and Troy in court. As we drove away from the prison, I looked back once. 18 months of my life gone, stolen by people I trusted. But I wasn't broken. I was angry, focused, and ready for war. Freedom Day had arrived. Now it was time for payback day. The 8 weeks between my release and the civil trial passed in a blur of preparation. Gerald Hopkins and his legal team worked tirelessly, building our case piece by piece. We met in Gerald's office 3 times a week. The conference room walls were covered with evidence boards, timelines, financial documents. Everything Jessica and Troy had done, laid out in damning detail. "Cameron, we need to prepare you for cross-examination," Gerald said during one session. "Jessica's attorney is going to come at you hard. They'll argue you should have noticed what was happening in your own financial affairs." "I trusted my wife," I said. "That's your answer," Gerald confirmed. "You trusted your spouse of 16 years. That's not negligence. That's normal human behavior." Monica, Gerald's paralegal, had prepared a presentation for the jury. Photos of Jessica and Troy at expensive restaurants. Bank statements showing the offshore accounts. Emails planning the scheme. The BMW purchase. The payments to Dennis Miller. "The jury needs to see who these people really are," Monica explained. "Not victims. Not people who made mistakes. Calculated criminals who framed an innocent man." My daughter Sophie sat through one of the prep sessions. She was nervous about testifying, but determined. "They're going to ask you about your mother," Gerald told Sophie gently. "About your relationship with her. About what you saw and heard. Just tell the truth. Don't embellish. Don't get emotional if you can help it." "What if I cry?" Sophie asked. "Then you cry," Gerald said. "You're a 15-year-old girl testifying against her mother. The jury will understand." I spent hours with Robert Flynn, the private investigator, going through his surveillance reports. Every detail mattered. Every photograph told part of the story. "The BMW is key," Robert explained. 48,000 in cash, right after they withdrew money from the Cayman accounts. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. A week before trial, Gerald received a final settlement offer from Jessica and Troy's attorneys. $1 million, paid over 5 years, in exchange for dropping the suit. Gerald presented it to me in his office. "It's not a bad offer, Cameron. Guaranteed money. No risk of losing a trial." I didn't hesitate. "No, I want them in court. I want a jury to hear what they did. I want a verdict that says they're guilty." Gerald nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that. Let's go to war." The night before trial, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my mother's living room, where I'd been staying since release, thinking about everything that led to this moment. Jessica's betrayal. Troy's arrogance. The 18 months stolen from my life. The damage to Sophie. The destruction of everything I'd built. Tomorrow, it would all be laid bare in a courtroom. My mother found me at 2 in the morning, sitting in the dark. "Can't sleep?" she asked, sitting beside me. "Nervous," I admitted. "What if we lose? What if the jury doesn't believe me?" "Cameron, you have the truth on your side," my mother said firmly. "You have evidence. You have witnesses. You have a daughter willing to testify against her own mother because she knows what's right. You're going to win." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. The morning of the trial, I dressed in the suit Gerald had helped me pick out. Conservative, professional. The image of a man who'd been wronged, not a criminal. Sophie wore a simple dress. My mother, a dignified pantsuit. We looked like what we were, a family seeking justice. Gerald met us at the courthouse steps. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I confirmed. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Media in the gallery, curious onlookers, supporters. And on the other side of the aisle, Jessica and Troy with their legal team. I looked at Jessica for the first time in 18 months. She looked smaller than I remembered. Scared. Good. Troy wouldn't meet my eyes. Coward. The judge entered. All rise. The Superior Court of Cuyahoga County is now in session, the Honorable Margaret Reynolds presiding. Judge Reynolds was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked at both sides of the courtroom. "We're here today for Bradford versus Bradford and Anderson," Judge Reynolds said. "Counsel, are you ready to proceed?" Gerald stood. "Ready, Your Honor." Jessica's attorney stood. "Ready, Your Honor." "Then let's begin," the judge said. "Mr. Hopkins, your opening statement." Gerald approached the jury. 12 people who would decide my future. He spoke clearly, passionately, laying out the case with precision. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about betrayal. About a wife and her lover who conspired to destroy an innocent man. Cameron Bradford trusted his wife. He trusted her with his finances, with his future, with his life. And she used that trust to frame him for federal crimes he didn't commit. I watched the jury as Gerald spoke. Some nodded. Some took notes. All listened intently. This was it. The moment everything changed. The trial lasted 6 days. 6 days of testimony, evidence, cross-examination. 6 days of reliving the betrayal, the fraud, the destruction of my life. Gerald called witnesses in strategic order. First, the forensic accountant who'd traced the money through shell companies to offshore accounts. Her testimony was dry but devastating. Numbers don't lie. The funds were systematically transferred from Bradford Solutions LLC to accounts in the Cayman Islands, she testified. Mr. Bradford's signature appears on the company registration, but the IP addresses used to access these accounts trace to Jessica Bradford and Troy Anderson's devices, not Mr. Bradford's. Next came Robert Flynn, the private investigator. He presented surveillance photos, financial records, evidence of Jessica and Troy's lavish spending. While Mr. Bradford was incarcerated, the defendants withdrew over $200,000 from offshore accounts, Robert testified. They purchased a luxury vehicle, dined at expensive restaurants, and attempted to buy property in Florida, all using money obtained through the fraudulent scheme. Jessica's attorney tried to discredit Robert during cross-examination, suggesting the surveillance was invasive or the photos misleading. It didn't work. The evidence was too clear. On day 3, Sophie took the stand. My 15-year-old daughter, facing down a courtroom full of strangers and her own mother. Gerald questioned her gently. "Sophie, did you ever hear your mother and Troy Anderson discuss your father's legal situation?" "Yes," Sophie said, her voice steady despite her obvious nerves. "I heard them talking about how stupid Dad was for signing documents without reading them. Mom said it was perfect because everything was in his name, so he'd take the fall." Jessica's face went pale. Troy stared at the table. "When was this?" Gerald asked. 2 weeks before Dad was arrested," Sophie said. "I was upstairs doing homework. They didn't know I could hear them." During cross-examination, Jessica's attorney tried to suggest Sophie was confused or mistaken. Sophie didn't waver. "I know what I heard," she said firmly. "My mother talked about my father like he was a problem to get rid of. I'll never forget it." On day 4, Dennis Miller testified. Troy's accomplice, the accountant who'd helped create the fraudulent returns. He'd been given immunity in exchange for his testimony. Troy Anderson approached me in June of that year, Miller said. He asked me to create shell companies and file tax returns that would appear to be from Cameron Bradford's business. He paid me $50,000 over 6 months. Did you ever meet Cameron Bradford? Gerald asked. Never. I dealt exclusively with Troy Anderson and Jessica Bradford. The prosecution rested on day 5. Jessica's attorney called character witnesses, people who claimed Jessica was honest and trustworthy. Gerald dismantled them on cross-examination. Then Jessica took the stand. That was their mistake. Gerald's cross-examination was surgical. He presented email after email, showing her planning the scheme with Troy. He showed bank records proving she'd accessed the offshore accounts. He showed photos of her spending stolen money. Mrs. Bradford, you testified that you believe your husband was involved in this scheme, Gerald said. Yet you visited him in prison every month for 18 months. Why? Jessica hesitated. I wanted to give him a chance to confess. You wanted him to confess to crimes you committed? Gerald pressed. We both made mistakes. Mrs. Bradford, yes or no? Did you create Bradford Solutions LLC without your husband's knowledge? I don't remember exactly. Yes or no, Mrs. Bradford? Yes, she finally admitted, her voice breaking. The jury's expression said everything. Disgust, anger, understanding. Closing arguments came on day 6. Gerald was brilliant, weaving together every piece of evidence into an undeniable narrative of conspiracy and fraud. Jessica's attorney tried to muddy the waters, suggesting I'd been negligent at minimum. It rang hollow after everything they'd heard. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. In the matter of Bradford versus Bradford and Anderson, on the charge of fraud and conspiracy, we find for the plaintiff, Cameron Bradford. We award damages in the amount of $1,400,000. The courtroom erupted. My mother grabbed my hand. Sophie was crying. Gerald shook my shoulder. Jessica collapsed in her chair. Troy put his head in his hands. Judge Reynolds banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Bradford, the court recognizes the severe harm done to you. The defendants are ordered to pay the full judgment within 90 days. Additionally, I'm referring this case to federal prosecutors for potential additional charges related to money laundering and witness tampering. It was over. I'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. I gave a brief statement. For 18 months, I sat in a federal prison for crimes I didn't commit. Today, a jury confirmed what I've always known. I was framed by people I trusted. This verdict doesn't give me back the time I lost, but gives me justice. For months later, I stood in my new apartment in Columbus, watching Sophie arrange books on a shelf. She'd chosen to live with me full-time. Jessica had visitation rights, but Sophie rarely used them. The judgment money had come through. After legal fees, I netted $800,000. Enough to rebuild, to start over. Jessica and Troy had both filed for bankruptcy. The BMW was sold, the jewelry gone, everything they'd bought with stolen money, seized to pay the judgment. And the federal prosecutors had filed additional charges. Money laundering, conspiracy. They were both looking at more prison time. My phone buzzed. A text from Gerald. Federal trial set for January. They're offering plea deals. Want you to know before you hear it elsewhere. I didn't care about their pleas. I got what I came for. Vindication. Justice. My life back. Sophie looked over at me. You okay, Dad? Yeah, I said, meaning it for the first time in 2 years. I'm okay. My wife and her lover had set me up for tax fraud. They'd stolen 18 months of my life. But I'd refused to break. I'd refused their visits. I built my case and fought back. Freedom Day had come. Payback Day had come. And I'd won.